may be seated. In the Greek language, there are two different words used to designate what we experience as time. There is a word called chronos, where you get the word chronology. That is a kind of way of expressing what we experience every day in the ordinary course of things, the passing of time, and how we fill that time with the routines that we find ourselves in this thing called life. But there is another word that the Greeks used for another kind of time, and that word was kairos. And kairos is a moment of time in which we encounter a sense of transcendence. It is that time, that moment when we encounter the divine. It is the intersection of the activity of God breaking into chronos, the ordinary of our lives. As we gather here this morning, my brothers and sisters, in this sacred place, we have now left the ordinary time of our lives behind. We have entered into the presence of a living God. We are in a moment of encounter as we come to offer our prayers and to offer worship and praise and adoration to the one who has called us into being. Not only that, but to the one who has never abandoned us nor will ever give up on us, but has worked ceaselessly for our salvation. We have entered into a sacred place. This is a moment now of great intimacy between your heart and the heart of God. It's in that silent inner chamber within your very soul that you will encounter the presence of the risen one. And as we gather in community as brothers and sisters who share this experience that we call faith, which means so much more than what we can possibly say about it, we somehow encourage and build one another up. We affirm in one another the work of God that is going on in our lives in a hidden way. It's as if we come here with the idea that our eyes would be reopened, that the veil will be removed from our sight, and we may once again see very clearly the true nature of ourselves, the nature of God and the world around us, so that we can act in integrity and according to the truth about things as they really are. Peace be with you. Those are the words of the risen Christ. His first words that he spoke when he appeared to his disciples on that first day of the week so long ago in the upper room that was bolted and closed. And he dramatically and miraculously appeared to them, and he says to them, "Peace be with you." Shalom is the word he would have used. The interesting thing about the word shalom is that the Hebrew word contains so much more meaning than the simple English word that we use to translate it as simply peace. Most of us, when we think of peace, we think of merely the absence of conflict. The word shalom says so much more than that, although it is inclusive of this idea of the absence of conflict. But shalom has a way of conveying things like, may it be well with you. May the blessing of God be upon you. May you be fully satisfied and content with the presence of God in your life. May it be well for you. May it be good. I'm reminded of the Christian hymn writer who said, "It is well with my soul. It is well. All is well. All is well." That's what the word shalom seeks to convey. It is not simply passivity, but it is an active blessing, a grace that energizes us and ushers us into the very presence of the divine. That is what shalom is, and this is the first words of the risen Christ to his disciples, shalom. Peace be with you. I'm not sure if you remember ever seeing a great painting that was created by the Dutch master Rembrandt of the Raising of the Cross. It's a poignant painting, and as you know, Rembrandt was noted for his ability to use light. as a way of drawing the observer's attention to the central action of what is going on in the painting, the central message which the artist is trying to convey through the image that he is creating. And in this painting, Jesus is being crucified, but he's not quite there yet. He's already been nailed to the cross, and now they're lifting and raising the cross, and you see Roman soldiers or servants that are pulling on ropes, raising the cross up as Jesus' body is helplessly fastened to that great implement of violence and death. The cross was a symbol that sent shudders through the souls of anyone who beheld such a horrible death. It was a form of state terrorism that was used to maintain power over the people. And usually people were crucified in a very open area near the main road of the city gate, going in and out from the city. So they will be reminded who is in charge. Yes, it's the Romans. And in the foreground, that is in the lower front of the picture, you get a good look at one of the servants who was straining at the rope to lift the great weight of the cross up with the body of Jesus upon the cross. And you can see the expression on the man's face as he's looking at you, the observer, looking at this image in this scene. First, the light leads you to behold Christ mounted on the cross being raised, but then your eye is drawn down to this particular character who is in the foreground looking at you as he's pulling the cross. And as many would not know, what the artist did in that picture was, it was a self-portrait of Rembrandt himself. Isn't that a poignant message? Peter, a few weeks after the death and resurrection of Jesus, preached his first sermon. And there were thousands of people that were gathered to hear what Peter was about to say. They had no idea what he was going to say. They got the attention of, their attention was drawn because it was the day of Pentecost, and there was a great tornado that came through town, and they came out to see the destruction, or so they thought. Instead, they found this band of disciples there, out in the open, and Peter there in the open, standing boldly before them, fearless, and he preaches his first message to the thousands that were gathered there. And Peter had the boldness to say, this Jesus, this Christ, the Messiah, whom you crucified him, God has raised from the dead. They were so touched with the conviction of the Holy Spirit and the power and the force of Peter's words that 3,000 people came to believe in the message of the gospel in that one day, hearing that one sermon. And they were all baptized and became followers of Jesus, many of whom were the very ones who crucified Jesus. Isn't that a strange twist in the story? The bad guys, not all of them, but many of them, become redeemed. They realized what they had done. They saw the truth about themselves and about humanity, and now they're seeing another truth about God and His generous love and His generous mercy and His compassionate heart and the great forgiveness of God. Perhaps they remembered when they were at the scene of the crucifixion, Jesus uttering the words, "Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing." Powerful image. Rembrandt understood that. That's why he painted his self-portrait. Because Rembrandt understands, as we all should understand, it just wasn't a bunch of those people over there that crucified Jesus. It was the human race that crucified him. If I was a Roman soldier living in that time, if I was a Jewish priest living at that time, would I have acted any differently than they? Am I somehow so much the better of a human being that I would not have gotten caught up in performing an act of great injustice and murder? The fact of the matter is, we all have the capability within our hearts to do things that we would think unthinkable in this context, but in another context we could easily see ourselves going along with the crowd. Well, this day was a great moment of reckoning for them when Peter spoke boldly. But Peter wasn't always so bold, my brothers and sisters. Peter is a human being like the rest of us, who was caught up in his fears and his anxieties and was well aware of his limitations, just like you or I. What makes Peter heroic is not because he was a perfect disciple or a perfect person. What made Peter heroic, my brothers and sisters, is that despite all of his failings, despite all of his flaws, despite all of the things that he did wrong and how many times he messed up, he nevertheless allowed God to use him and could proclaim the gospel in a bold way. It was true for Peter 2,000 years ago. It's true for you today. God uses imperfect human beings to accomplish his will in the world. He's looking for those who are broken-hearted, for those who are damaged goods, so to speak. And those are the very people God seeks to transform and to make into instruments of grace and salvation, to become co-workers with his Son Jesus in saving all of creation. That is what you are. That is what I am. God uses us to do great things. So don't think that you don't have the skills. Don't ever give in to the temptation that you're just too flawed and damaged of a human being to do any good for God in this world. That is not true at all. That is what the enemy would have you think. The reality is that the Holy Spirit can transform and use you, because the Holy Spirit is the very power of God. It was the Holy Spirit that raised Jesus, who was dead in a tomb. Raised him up from death. That is power, my brothers and sisters. And if the Holy Spirit can raise up a dead person from the grave, then it's fully within the capability of the Holy Spirit to raise you up out of the ashes and out of the wreck of your life, and bring you to a place in which you can begin to taste and realize the great destiny of God that has been set before you. You are no accident. God has chosen you. And the wisdom of his mind that is known only to him for purposes all his own, God has chosen you to be his instrument in the world. God is speaking to you at this very moment. Don't sell yourself short. Today is the day of salvation, Peter said. And 3,000 came to believe in the gospel of Jesus. But on the day of the resurrection, on Sunday, the first day of the week, Peter was not standing in front of a crowd, fearlessly and boldly proclaiming the message of Jesus. Where was Peter? He was with the other 11 disciples and some women and some other people that were hiding behind closed doors. Now put yourself in the shoes of Peter, the disciples. They were having a great time when they came to Jerusalem. Crowds were following after Jesus. They took over the temple, to the chagrin of the high priest. They were there in the temple plaza, like being in the Vatican Square. They took it over. They chased out the money changers. And Jesus was teaching. And there was nothing the authorities could do. The disciples were already looking over the city of Jerusalem, checking out what palace they would be living in, since they're on the winning team. They had been making their plans. They knew Jesus was the one who was going to throw out the hated Romans, or so they thought. Then something strange and bewildering happens. There in the Garden of Gethsemane a few days earlier, their own disciple friend, fellow disciple, Judas, comes and betrays Jesus with a kiss. And Jesus is arrested and he is taken away. The disciples run in utter fear. They abandon Jesus, except for Simon Peter. Peter says, I will fight for my Lord. He even draws a sword. He's even willing to use violence to protect his Lord, but to no avail. And Jesus tells them to put the sword down. And they bound Jesus and they took him away, and you know the familiar story. You can imagine how these events crushed his disciples. This was so unreal. It was not what they expected. So much in our lives, my brothers and sisters, does not turn out in the way we expect. You know, while we're busy making plans, God has other ideas. God is already at work in a hidden way in our lives, and we think somehow we have it all figured out. We think we are in control of our own destiny, that we're the captain of our own ship. when nothing could be further from the truth. God is at work in a mysterious way. And Jesus was taken from them, and they were shattered, and they were afraid. They were filled with fear. They feared for their own lives. Peter followed behind, but even Peter would deny Jesus 3 times. He would lose his nerve, and he would also be as guilty as Judas in betraying Jesus, and he would become a broken man. Peter was afraid that day on the first day of the week. He was in the upper room. It was a safe house for the disciples because they knew if they went after their leader, Jesus, it won't be long before the Roman authorities will arrest them, and they too will meet a similar fate of being crucified on the cross like a common criminal. And they were afraid. They were terrified. And then, on top of all this, some of the women among them said they had gone to the tomb and found the stone rolled away, the tomb empty, and that Jesus was raised from the dead. And the 11 and the other disciples mocked the women, saying, "You are caught up in hysterics. We can't believe you." Because in those days, men didn't believe the word of women, you know. I don't know if it's changed much today. The battle of the gender still goes on. But, you know, you can't accept a woman at her word because she's caught up in all kinds of emotion and hysterics. And after all, they were all deeply grieving. So they said they saw Jesus alive. They don't know what they're saying. And they did not believe. And then suddenly that late afternoon, Jesus appears among them. And he says to them, "Shalom, peace be with you." And the writer Luke tells us they were afraid. They thought they were seeing a ghost. Has anyone ever seen a ghost? Anyone? You can see them on TV, you know. The Ghost Hunters or something. I saw the movie The Ghostbusters. I knew you'd like that. But Jesus says, "No, do not be afraid. I am not a ghost. I am like you. I have a body of flesh and blood. Touch me. Handle me. This is a body. Excuse me. Give me something to eat. A piece of fish." And so they gave it to him. And he ate a piece of fish. And that was the convincing proof because ghosts don't eat. Ever see a ghost eat? Ghosts do not eat. So he proved to them in their own minds that he was physically present to them. And they marveled. They marveled. And they rejoiced, and yet they remained afraid. They didn't know what they were encountering. This was an experience that no human being had ever encountered before in the entire history of the world. No one comes back from the dead. The long centuries and millennia of human experience has taught us that once someone is truly dead, they remain that way. No one comes back from the dead. We have stories of hauntings and ghost stories, but this is quite unlike any of those stories. This is a situation in which the disciples, for the very first time, saw something that had never occurred upon the planet Earth ever in our entire history. They beheld the glorified, risen Christ who was dead and now was raised by the dead by the power of the Holy Spirit. And he stood among them and he says to them, "Peace be with you. May it be well with you. Do not be afraid." My brothers and sisters, they put their faith in the risen Christ and in his words because they had this dynamic encounter and experience, and it transformed them. And with the coming of the Holy Spirit, they were given the power to proclaim the gospel of Jesus, which is essentially the gospel of the resurrection, which is the central mystery of the Christian faith. Mortality gives way to immortality. Death is swallowed up by life. The sting of death is removed. Jesus is the first one to be raised from the dead. With the resurrection of Jesus, there is a new beginning for creation. The new creation is coming into existence, and it has been doing so ever since. We experience the new life of Christ in our hearts. That's where resurrection first occurs. Resurrection, for you and I, my brothers and sisters, occurs within our heart, where we once were dead to the things of the Spirit, and somehow the Holy Spirit raises us from death when we hear the word of truth spoken to us. Something changes. The disciples said when they heard Jesus speak, were not our hearts burning burning within us. There is a burning sensation within your heart that bears witness to the truth of the gospel. And it transforms everything. Most of all, it transforms you. That is the beginning of immortality for you. And God is saving the world. And He's saving humanity. And He's saving you, my brother or sister, from the inside out. It begins within the heart. And as your faith grows ever stronger, the more alive you become, despite the fact that my mortal body continues to die. I'm reminded of this every time I look in the mirror in the morning. I look at that image in the mirror, I say, I can't be me. But it is. The mirror never lies. And I see the wrinkles, and I see the worn skin, and I've got gray on my beard now, and my body doesn't act the way I'd like for it to act. I don't climb up on the roof of my house anymore because, you know, I'm growing older. My body is mortal. And although I am outwardly wasting away, my brothers and sisters, within my heart there is an indestructible, immortal life that's being birthed. There is something eternal within my heart and within my soul that will endure the destruction of the body. You know, when I look in the mirror and see that image and I walk away, I forget all about it. And I go back to thinking I'm 21 years old. I still think I look like I did when I was 21. Don't you? You know, whose wise idea was it to invent a mirror? To dispel all my illusions, which keep me comforted in my existence. But there is something even better that is yet awaiting me. And that is the transformation of my own body, my own lifeless body, into that of the risen, like that of the risen Christ. If we will suffer with Him, if we will endure injustice, if we will put up with the troubles of this life and respond to it in love and in compassion and in faith, then I too share in the death and suffering of Jesus. And if I'm willing to forgive others, as God is willing to forgive me, then I can guarantee you, my brothers and sisters, that I have the gift of immortality that has been imparted for me. For if I suffer and die with Christ, if I willingly embrace my mortality and my death without fear, then I can be assured that I will share in His eternal resurrection. The day will come, my brothers and sisters, when this world will pass away as we know it, and this body will be done away with. But never fear, God is going to raise the world as well as ourselves from the dead. And being raised from the dead, my brothers and sisters, is not what we often think it is. We often think it is a resuscitation of a corpse. Oh, it's much more than that. It is not just the resuscitation of a dead corpse back to life like Frankenstein. No, it is the transformation of mortality into immortality. And so the body that Jesus had was so transformed and so utterly different, the disciples could hardly describe what it was like. So they didn't. They just said, we didn't recognize Him at first. Something had changed about Him. And what had changed is that that material body of His was transformed into another kind of reality that we do not encounter in this world. It was a glorified body, a spiritual body, St. Paul tells us, where we have a body, which just seems like a contradiction. We divide the world into the spirit world, into the physical world. But in Jesus, the two worlds are combined, and we have, in the case of His risen body, spiritualized matter. It is a body of flesh and bone, but it's a body that is not held strictly to the laws of physics and nature as we understand it today. It is a foreshadowing of that great destiny that awaits us. We are a people of destiny, my brothers and sisters. You're a person of destiny. And God has created you for a very special purpose and will act accordingly. This is why the risen Christ spoke to His disciples and said, peace be with you. Peace be with you. And salvation is not just for human beings or a few select human beings. Salvation is for the whole universe. God's going to recreate the whole of creation. And the darkness of death and evil will be radically removed and will be forgotten. And all that will remain is the glory of God in His presence with all the universe, all the creation. It's as if creation is a great house that He's waiting to move into. And we are a part of that process. And that work of transforming the world begins with us, with our hearts. And there's two ways that happens. First of all, if I'm going to be cooperating with God in the work of salvation within my heart and the work of the salvation of the world, then I need to be attentive to personal holiness. I need to care about my character. Why? Because God happens to think that's important. We need to care about how we behave. We need to care about what kind of people we are. We need to stop being negative and critical of others. We need to be positive. We need to be blessing the earth and blessing others. We are to be transformed in our hearts. And if our hearts are transformed, then our bodies too will be transformed on that great day of resurrection when Christ comes again. But in the meantime, we have a second thing we need to be attentive to. We need to be a missional people. We need to be a people dedicated to proclaiming the gospel, and all that we say and do, we need to bless the earth. And on this day, which is the Earth Day, we need to call to mind the important responsibility entrusted us to be good stewards of the earth, to bring healing to the earth, and to bring peace to all the world. The risen Christ says to you right at this moment, my brothers and sisters, Shalom. Peace be with you. May it be well with your soul. And that, my brothers and sisters, is the gospel of the Lord. Amen. Shall we stand and profess our faith?